Instead of following up with them every single week, every single month, I might reach out every 90 days, every 180 days, every year, and it just kind of I space it out a little bit more to not harass them, to not obtain to not get a restraining order. Like and subscribe to our YouTube page for our Want to Know Wednesdays segment. Every Wednesday at 4:30 Central Standard Time, we're going to be releasing a video for beginning investors, entrepreneurs, and business people. Tip number 1, learn and educate yourself. Don't blindly just invest money. This is true when it comes to operations and the investing, and there's two pieces to it, right? Because if you're just starting, you might buy a 4-unit with yourself and your family where you're the investor and the operator. But also as a beginning investor, you could invest along with someone else where you're not operating the deal each day. From an operations standpoint, you need to understand, hey, how are we truly adding value here? How are we increasing revenues? How are we maintaining or lowering expenses to get a higher net operating income or EBITDA number, which ultimately gives you a higher valuation of the business? You need to know how to run a team. You need to know how all those moving parts work, because you're going to be doing it day in and day out to get that investment to work for you, to be able to pump out cash flow to the investors, to be able to get that money to multiply for the investors. And the investors could be just yourself, it could be your family, it could be other people that you bring on board, right? If you're more passive and you invest in a deal but you're not operating, you might not have to know that actual industry as well. You should be familiar with it, in my opinion. You should have an idea how it works. But more importantly, you need to know and get educated on who is operating it, right? You can't just give someone $100,000 or $50,000 or $20,000 because they're your friend or your cousin or whatever, right? You have to be able to understand like what their experience is, what their goal is, how they're going to achieve, right? Get to know that person and have full faith that they're going to succeed with you. So it's also not saying, hey, don't invest with that friend, don't invest with your cousin, but you better vet them. You better ask the hard questions to them. How are they going to make that investment perform for you? Get educated. Do not blindly throw money, right? It doesn't mean you're going to lose maybe on the first deal if you blindly throw money. You might get lucky, right? But somewhere along the way, you're going to lose and lose big if you're completely blind and completely uneducated on the industry that you're investing in and or the person and the operator that is operating the asset that you're invested in. Tip number 2, invest for cash flow. This is important early on because you might not have a huge net worth. You might not have a lot of cash coming in. And so when you're just starting, it's important to invest for cash flow. As you get more experienced, and sometimes even before you are experienced, you're going to probably break this rule where it might make sense to make an investment where you don't have as much cash flow. For example, I've got an investment that they don't pay cash flow because all they do is when I made the investment, right, all they do is they take all the earnings and instead of distributing them back out, they put all those earnings towards more acquisitions, right? And that investment over a 5-year period of time has 4x'd. Now, I haven't gotten a lot of cash flow each month from that, so that if I didn't have cash flow coming from other places, that'd be a hard investment to make it through, right? Because it's illiquid. And we're going to win at the end of the day on that deal. But when I first started, everything that I did was cash flow positive day one. The first 4 units that I bought, cash flow positive day one with the ability to raise that cash flow by raising rents and making improvements to the property. The second investment I made was cash flow producing asset, right? The next one, cash flow producing asset. So still, even as I'm going along this journey, 98% of the investments that I'm making are cash flow producing. They're paying me every single month while the principal that I invested is also multiplying and growing inside the investment. So the investment is growing. The initial money that I put into the deal is 2xing, 3xing, 4xing, 5xing as time goes on. But it's also throwing me cash flow every single month that then I can use to pay, for where I live. I can use to pay for groceries. I can use to pay to go to the Packer game. I can use to pay to, go to a trip with our family. So cash flow producing assets are by far the way to go when you are a beginner. Tip number 3, once principal is invested, always keep it invested. So what I mean by this is when I put that money into that first 4 unit, it was $40,000, right? When we refinanced that and I got that $40,000 back, I didn't go spend that $40,000 because I initially put that $40,000 to work in that deal. And when it spit it back out through a refinance or if it spit it back out through a sale, I make sure at a minimum that $40,000 is getting reinvested into the next deal. Because when I put that 40K to work, I want to make sure that it's going to continuously work for me. I want to grow the amount of principal that I have invested, and I never want to touch that principal. And if I can do that, if I get to a point where I'm adding, each year $40,000 that I'm putting to work as principal for me, I want that $40,000 to work for me forever. Those dollars, you can make them work, right? You never want your money not working once it starts working. If I take that principal away and I just start buying, and I eat away at that principal by buying a boat and buying a house with that principal, soon I'm not going to have investable assets that are paying me each month, and I'm not having principal that's doubling, 3xing, 5xing, 10xing over periods of time in investments. Same thing is true when the checks get bigger, right? And I've got maybe 15 different deals. So this is something you can implement when you're a beginner, but also when you're more advanced. If I've got 15 different deals and I've got 40,000 to $1 million invested in each deal, whenever those individual deals sell, I'm at least going to put that principal back to work. If I got $1 million in a deal, it comes back to me because it's sold. I'm going to go put the $1 million into the next deal. I'm not going to go spend the $1 million. Now, if you really want to play offense and really want to build your wealth as a beginner, you're going to also take all the profits from that deal when it sells, because that $1 million over 10 years could turn into $3 million. I not only take the $1 million, put it to work and keep the principal, I put that whole $3 million back to work, because now I know that $3 million is going to pay me $300,000 a year in cash flow, and the $3 million is going to 3x over 10 years time. So keeping principal to work and keeping as much of your profits to work as possible makes a lot of sense, especially when you're a beginner, and even as you're starting to advance into intermediate and advanced levels of investing. Tip number 4, invest all earned income and spend the money that you have coming in from cash flow. So what I mean by this is anything that I personally buy, Packers tickets, when I go golfing, when I go on personal vacations and trips, where I live, right? All of that stuff is not paid for by my earned income. I didn't own a single family home until I had almost 1,000 apartments, right? Because I wanted my passive income, my cash flow, to be able to pay for where I lived, right? So I rented to keep my, I knew when I rented, I knew exactly how much money I was going to have out each month, because I wasn't going to have to fix a boathouse. I wasn't going to have to fix a leaky toilet. I wasn't going to have to fix the washer dryer. I wasn't going to have to get a new refrigerator. I wasn't going to have to put a new roof on. So I rented to keep my expenses and outflow the same and less than home owning, right? But then as I got money invested, and that cash flow started to come to me each month, and as that cash flow grew from $1,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 a month, then I would start to take that cash flow and I would use that cash flow to buy and to pay for my monthly, our mortgage, right, on our house. That, yes, the house that I live in is a liability. I take that cash flow and that pays for that each month. The cash flow pays for the boat that we have. The cash flow pays for vacations. I don't spend any of the earned income that I get. All the earned income that I get, trading dollars for hours, right? Trading my hours to get dollars, earned income. I make sure I get that all invested. Same was true when I was just starting. I didn't spend anything. As my earned income went up, and as my 1099 income went up through direct sales, I didn't spend more of my W-2 wages. I didn't spend my 1099 wages as they went up. Even as they went from 5,000 to 10,000, I kept spending like I was making $2,000 a month, because I was saving my earned income so I could dump it all into the next cash flow producing asset to get my cash flow up that would then give me more joys and more experiences in life. Tip number 5, look at how bad an investment can do and you still make it through. And so what I mean by this is if you're just the investor, or if you're the investor and the operator, I'm like an investor and an operator in what we do in real estate, right? Because I'm investing in the deals. I get investors that are more passive. They invest in the deals. I'm the operator. My company is operating the deals, right? And so I always, from an operator and an investor standpoint, I'm always looking at how bad a deal can do and we still make it through and not lose the principal, right? So I look at how bad a property can do and it still pays some cash flow. I look at it, how bad a deal can do and it pays no cash flow. But we can still take care of the asset and pay the mortgage, right? I look at how bad an asset and how bad it can get it from a micro and a macroeconomic environment, and I stress test the assets, right? I stress test the investments, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this. How little money can an investment bring in to still pay its obligations, utilities, payroll, real estate taxes, insurance, right? Mortgage, and break even at least, right? To make it through a bad time. It's not ideal that that's what it does, and I don't just invest for a break even deal, but I still have to look at what's the downside, how likely is that downside to happen, and how can we potentially hedge against that downside. Tip number 6, when possible, seek tax advantages. Now, not everything is advantageous from a tax standpoint as other things, but once you start getting passive income, you do get a lot of tax breaks, tax benefits. Earned income is where you get beat up the hardest in taxes, right? If you earn enough, you're going to get paid, you're going to get taxed 35, 40, 28, 30, 35, 40%, right? And so, but when you make investments and your money starts working for you, your capital gains tax is right around 20%, right? So, and you're going to have the benefit, like in real estate, you're going to have a benefit of when we sell a deal, we can potentially pay no capital gains tax and keep all the profit working for us if we 1031 it forward, right? With your passive income, it's completely possible to legally pay 0 state and Fed income tax for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years plus, because as one asset starts to really take off, and if you're continually investing, there are a lot of tax write-offs and deductions for depreciation. There's a lot of tax write-offs and all your operating expenses are tax write-off. Any interest that you pay, I'm always going to have debt on my properties. Why? Because all the interest that we pay is a tax write-off, right? And so when you first invest in deals early on in businesses, whether it's real estate or any other type of business, you're typically going to show a tax loss for the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Even though you're making money, you'll still show a tax loss. Now, as you've got deals that have been around for 5+ years, those deals will start to show a tax gain, where if those are the only deals you'd be invested in, you're going to have to pay tax. But if you're continuously always investing every single quarter, every single year, then you're always getting new assets that those tax losses can then offset, where you have a tax liability in a deal that you might have had for 5+ years. They'll offset each other because they're passive income. So always have that in mind, but you don't want to just invest for tax purposes. It shouldn't be the sole. You get to a certain point, it can be the sole. But when you're just starting as a beginner, just to only invest in something for a tax advantage doesn't necessarily make sense, because you don't have enough offense to really enough offense or cash flow coming in, or enough experienced and seasoned businesses to really take advantage of all the tax benefits, if that makes sense. Tip number 7, don't do this alone, get a team. And so what this means is any person that I see that thinks they can be their own attorney, their own accountant, their own bookkeeper, their own everything, whatever it is, they always end up, not being around. And they can never build the scale that really protects you. The larger you become, the more protected you are when bad things happen. The more experienced people around you that are very good in their niche, the better off you're going to be, because you're always going to come across things that you might not have the answers for, and you need to be surrounded by people that do have the answers. Spend the money and have an attorney. Spend the money and have an accountant. Spend the money and get a bookkeeper. Invest in a property that's big enough so that you can have a team that helps you manage it. Anytime I hear someone say, I'm going to go do this alone, I can figure out these legal docs, I'm just like, it's someone that I know that I would never put my money with it, and it's typically someone that I'm like, hey, we're going to be able to buy this deal and see a lot of upside, because they have not squeezed all the juice out of the orange, all the juice out of the lemon, and there's a lot of upside left on the table, because them doing it all alone is never going to get the best results. So there's still going to be a lot of upside there. So when you're invested in a deal, when you're operating and invested in a deal, make sure you surround yourself with people that you can get all the answers, so that you can squeeze all the juice out of that lemon, all the juice out of that orange, and get the best return on your investment, and get that asset performing the way it needs to perform for you and your finances. Tip number 8, track your personal and business finances and review them regularly. I'm like, ever since high school, for some reason, every single month I've always reconciled my savings, my checking from a personal standpoint. I've always done it. And sometimes some months it drives my wife crazy because I'm like, hey, we got to get this stuff all gathered. We got to do this. We got to get our stuff right. We pay attention to the details, right? And that's really what it is you need to pay attention to the details. I always know how much cash we have. I always know, how much outflow personally and from a business that we have each month. On the business standpoint, right, our team is always tracking, we have our general ledger and we have the receipts coming in and they're coding them and they're spitting out financials, right? I'm getting income statements, I'm getting balance sheets. You need to learn how to read an income statement. You need to learn how to read a balance sheet. And it's not rocket science, but you have to start and you got to learn, because the income statement, the balance sheet is the heartbeat of the business. It's going to tell you if there's troubling times ahead based on the results that you've seen in the past, right? It shows you where you can improve. It shows you where there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit that can take your $40,000 investment and turn into a $60,000 investment by making a few tweaks. If you can't pay attention to your personal finances and business finances, you're going to leave a lot on the table. And a lot of times we buy assets from people they might have a $6 million asset, a $15 million asset, but they don't track any of that stuff. So they really have no idea where there's opportunity. A lot of times we'll go through and we'll be buying a deal, and in due diligence, we know more about that asset and where the opportunity lies in that asset because we simply look at the numbers and pay attention to it when other people and a lot of people out there do not do that. So make it a habit. And if you're just starting where you don't have any investments yet, you better make it a habit where you're balancing your checks. Go get a Quicken account or QuickBooks account, one of the two, or some type of software that helps you balance and go learn how to balance your own checkbook, right? And start there. Not hard to do, not rocket science. Go balance your debit card, your credit card. Go balance all the accounts that you have in your name every single month and start tracking it. If you're not tracking it, you're not going to grow. I can go back and track my net worth from when I was in high school, when it was negative or zero or whatever, all the way up to today, because it was done every single month, right? And things that you do not track, you're never going to see results in, period. You won't see results in it. The people that have the best results when they're working out and stuff, they're usually tracking their results. They're paying attention to their weight. They're paying attention to what they're eating. They're paying attention to how many reps and how much weight's on the bar, right? And so when they're tracking and they also have a plan, they're gonna make a lot more headway than the person that's just gonna show up to the gym randomly and not track anything, not have any idea, just kind of being lackadaisical. Don't be lackadaisical with your finances or your investments or your financial education. Get it right. Tip number 9, network by sharing your story. Too many times people are like, yeah, network. And yes, networking is important. But if you're just going to a networking event and you're not actually meeting people and not actually hearing their story and not sharing your story, you're just wasting time. There's no point to network. If you're going to network, be intentional with it, right? Networking takes time. It takes effort. And anytime that you're doing that, you want to make sure you're productive. If you're not being productive with it, and that time's not being put to good use, stop doing it. There's too many people that just network to network, waste their time. I'm very intentional when I network. I'm not a super sociable, like, just, hey, I'm there for a purpose, and I'm going to share my story of what we've done and what we're doing and what we're going to do. And if you haven't started yet, that's fine. Just share what you have done. Whether you've got a sports background and you're just graduating college, you can share your success. Hey, real quick, one sentence. Hey, this is what I did in college. And share, like, if you were part of the team, if you were an All-American, if you had success, right? Somewhere that you've had success in your life, share that. Share what you want to do. Share what you're doing now and share what you want to do, right? And then as you advance, your story from your past gets better and more appealing. What you're doing now gets better and more appealing, and can attract different types of people. And what you're going to do usually changes and grows too, which again attracts a different type of person. Now you're intentionally networking versus just showing up randomly to an event and wasting your time. And you show up to the event and you feel good about it and you think you're actually doing something good when you're just wasting your time. Always be intentional. Don't be scared to share your story and be worried that other people are just thinking you're arrogant or egotistical or whatever. No, like, if people don't know what you've done, don't know what you're doing, and don't know what you want to do in the future, they can never ever help you. I can't tell you how many times. And here's the thing too, is when you're talking to someone that's doing, if you're trying to attract attention from someone who's a lot bigger than you or further ahead than you so that they can invest in your project, they're never going to be the person that makes fun of you for sharing your story and what you're doing. The people that are going to make fun of you or talk bad about you or call you arrogant or call you egotistical are the people that you've outgrown, and they have not seen as much success as you have, and you don't want them as a partner anyway, because they can't truly help you. And if they have that mindset of you being egotistical, you truly can't really help that person either, because they can't get out of their own minds. They can't get out of their own way with their mindset on how things need to be done. Never be scared to share your story, where you're at and where you're going. That's the only way you're going to attract other people into your life that you need, from your team standpoint, from an investor standpoint, from a deal flow standpoint, from an education standpoint. You're going to meet the people that will help you the most. And the people that, can really change your life and change your business life. You're going to meet all those people by sharing your story and sharing it intently. And it doesn't mean you go on for a full half hour. I get my story as what we're doing here, what I have done in the past, what we're doing now, and what we're doing in the future. I get that concise down to literally, I can say it in 10 seconds. I can say it in 30 seconds. I can make it 2 minutes, kind of depending on if they ask a question or, whatever. But I try to keep it concise. I don't make it a half hour story. I just give them the PowerPoints, right? To really to start that conversation. Tip number 10, consistently follow up. What I mean by this is when you share your story, like I talked about in tip number 9, and you want that person that you're sharing your story with to be involved with you or invest in you or sell you a project or whatever. I've never had it happen where it's like on the first time of me telling that story, the first connection, them being like, yep, I'm investing $1 million. Or yep, hey, I've got this 300 unit deal I want to sell you. Or yep, da-da-da-da-da, right? I've had to continually follow up with people. Because what's going to happen is the most successful people out there, they get pitched daily. Every minute, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, they're getting a pitch from somebody that they very likely do not know, because they're likely under a microscope a little bit. A lot of people know who they are. A lot of people know that they can really help them, right? And so they're getting a lot. So you have to stand out, where you can't be the person that reaches out just one time and expect something. You can't be the person that reaches out just 2 times. They're going to watch you maybe do 2 or 3 deals. They're going to watch you reach out to them and politely and respectfully, and consistently follow up with them. They're not just going to be a pushover. Right? I can't tell you how many times I have people reach out to me. Hey, will you be on my podcast? Hey, will you do it? Hey, will you do it? Hey, will you look at this for me? Hey, but the person that is reaching out kind of consistently, like once every week or once every month, and lightly, not like being a hammer on me and whatever, but just kind of there, right? Sometimes it takes a year, 2 years, but I'll finally look at their project, or I'll finally give them some of the tips that they've been asking for, or I'll finally help them in a way that they need to be helped. Right? And so it's the same thing for me. I can't tell you how many people I've just circled back with. And sometimes it takes 10 years to get that person to sell their property to you. Sometimes it takes 5 years, 15 years, 3 years to get that person to invest $50,000 with you, right? Or $250,000 with you, or $3 million with you, or $6 million with you, right? Sometimes it takes, 12 touches to sell somebody on an idea or a product or whatever it might be. Failure to follow up is just ultimately going to lead to your failure. And not that you failed, but the failure to follow up is going to suck you dry of any future business. It's going to leave you short of opportunity. Consistently and always, always, always follow up. Even when people tell me this, hey, stop following up with me, I'm not interested in this, I just put them on a different list. And instead of following up with them every single week, every single month, I might reach out every 90 days, every 180 days, every year. And it just I space it out a little bit more to not harass them, to not, to not get a restraining order, right? Always follow up.